I stand on the shoreline, the vast expanse of the ocean stretching out before me. The waves crash against the sand, a rhythmic, deafening sound that mirrors the turmoil inside my soul. For weeks, months, it feels like years, I've been lost, drifting in a sea of hopelessness. My life, once a vibrant tapestry of purpose and joy, now feels like a faded, colorless canvas. Every prayer I've whispered into the silence feels unanswered. Every cry for help swallowed by the roaring wind. I came here seeking a solace I haven't found, a sign that there's more to this crushing weight than just a relentless cycle of despair. I look out at the horizon, where the sky and the water become one, a perfect, seamless line. And I feel a profound loneliness. It's the kind of loneliness that makes your bones ache and your spirit feel small. The sun is setting, casting long, bruised purple shadows across the water. It's a beautiful sight, but all I can see is the end of another day spent without purpose. I feel the grains of sand beneath my feet, cold and rough, a harsh reminder of how small I am in this immense world. I feel insignificant, a tiny speck against the backdrop of eternity. I've tried everything. I've read the books, listened to the sermons, and followed the advice. But the emptiness remains. It's an ache that lives deep within my chest, a void that nothing seems to fill. My voice, normally so full of life, is now just a whisper, a broken sound caught in the throat. I've been crying out, pleading, bargaining, but I'm met with a silence that is more terrifying than any noise. I feel utterly alone. I cry out to the sea, a raw, primal sound torn from my very core. Tell me what to do. The ocean answers only with the stash meta, my voice cracking. If you are real, if you truly exist, if you're out there somewhere in this vast, unending universe, please give me a sign. Just one. Please. The words are a surrender, a final, fragile attempt to connect with something, anything, beyond myself. I close my eyes, and for the first time in a long time, I don't think about what I want to happen. I just let go. I sit there, on the cold sand, with the roar of the ocean in my ears and the silence of my heart, waiting. I wait for the sign, for the answer, for a feeling of something, anything, to come my way. But there's nothing. Just the waves, the sand, and the setting sun. The silence of the heavens seems to mock my small, desperate act of faith. I think about turning back, about giving up entirely, but something keeps me rooted to the spot. A tiny, irrational flicker of hope that refuses to be extinguished. It's a testament to the human spirit's refusal to give up, even when everything seems lost. My prayer was not a demand, but a final, heartfelt plea from a soul on the brink of collapse. I ask for a sign, not a miracle, but a gentle touch to guide my way. I need to feel something, anything, to know I'm not shouting into the void. My cry to God is a testament to my ultimate surrender and a final, desperate attempt at connection. I need to know my words have been heard, that my pain is recognized, and that I am not alone. I'm exhausted, but I cannot leave, not yet. I keep my eyes on the horizon, waiting for a sign, any sign, that my prayer wasn't for nothing. I'm looking for a sign that my plea has been heard, a sign that my agony has been recognized. I desperately want to know that I am not just a lonely soul, but a cherished child of God. The endless ocean reflects the endless depths of my despair, but I am determined to find some solace. The wind howls, hash at meta, pause, sex. He changed, a silent companion in my misery. The sun had finally dipped below the horizon, and the sky was a deep, velvet blue. The stars began to emerge, one by one, like tiny pinpricks of light in the vast darkness. The old man looked up at them, and his face seemed to glow with a gentle reverence. I felt an inexplicable urge to speak, to pour out the pain that had been suffocating me. And so I did. I told him everything. I told him about the sleepless nights, the gnawing anxiety, the feeling of being abandoned by a God I had so desperately sought. I told him how my faith had shattered, piece by piece, until there was nothing left but dust and echoes. He listened to every word, his gaze fixed on the waves, never once interrupting. He didn't offer advice or quote scripture. He simply absorbed my words, a silent witness to my suffering. My story was long and filled with a raw, unfiltered pain. But he remained. He let me be honest, and in his quiet presence, I found a freedom I hadn't known I needed. My pleas and my cries, which had felt so loud and ugly just moments before, seemed to soften in the face of his calm acceptance. He didn't offer me solutions. He offered me space to exist in my own pain. When I finally fell silent, the only sounds were the lapping of the waves and the gentle rustle of his worn clothes. The silence was different this time. It wasn't a void, but a presence. It was filled with a patience that the universe had never shown me before. He turned his head slowly towards me, and a soft smile touched his lips. "The sea has a way of teaching us," he said, his voice a low rumble, as gentle as the tide. "It has seen it all. It has heard every prayer, every sob, every cry of triumph and despair." He didn't lecture me about faith or tell me what I should believe. Instead, shat meta, sex, in the quiet acceptance of his fate. He realized that God was in the vastness of the sea, in the endless sky, and most importantly, in the unshakable peace he had found in his own heart. The sailor was eventually rescued, not by a grand display of power, but by a passing ship. Yet, he always said that his true salvation had come much earlier, in that quiet moment when he had finally surrendered to the sea and found a connection he had never expected. The old man finished his story, his gaze returning to the horizon. "Some people find him in a church," he said quietly, "but many of us, out here on the water, find him in the quiet." He wasn't preaching. He was simply sharing a truth he had lived, a truth that spoke directly to the core of my own despair. The old fisherman's story settled in the quiet air between us, a gentle melody of truth that seemed to linger long after he had finished speaking. It wasn't a story of a great miracle or a powerful intervention, but of a quiet surrender and a profound discovery. The wisdom in his eyes was palpable, and I found myself studying him, trying to understand how a man who had spent his life battling the elements could hold so much peace within him. He turned from the ocean, his gaze falling upon me with a soft intensity. He didn't ask about my pain or my past. He didn't offer a sermon or a call to conversion. Instead, he asked a single, simple question that felt more powerful than any sermon I had ever heard. "When you look out at the sea," he asked, his voice a low, thoughtful murmur, "what do you see?" I looked at the waves, the endless, dark expanse under the starlit sky. I saw the power, not a threat to you. The thought was so foreign to me, so completely at odds with my own perspective, that I could only stare at him in silence. He wasn't suggesting that I ignore my fear, but that I use it as a starting point. The first step of any true prayer, he continued, his eyes twinkling with a shared secret, is to acknowledge what is. And what you see, what you feel, is a reflection of a truth that is far greater than your fear. You see a terrifying infinity, but that is merely your human lens. The real infinity, the one that holds everything together, is boundless love, not boundless emptiness. He paused, letting his words sink into the quiet space between us. I had never thought of my fear as a starting point for faith. I had always seen it as an obstacle, a weakness I needed to overcome. He was showing me that my brokenness was not a barrier to God, but a direct pathway to Him. "So," he said, his voice turning gentle, almost like a father speaking to his child, "your prayer is not about getting an answer. It's about changing your perspective. It's about shifting your gaze from what you lack to what is already there." He looked at me, his calm eyes searching mine, and then he asked his final, most profound question. "So, tell me, what was your first prayer? Truly, not the one you said in desperation, but the one you felt in your soul. The one that came from your deepest, most honest place." My mind raced back to the moment I had collapsed on the sand, to the raw, unfiltered plea I had whispered into the night. It wasn't a demand for a miracle. It was a simple, aching request for a sign of His existence. It was a surrender. I had asked not for a solution, but for a connection. A chance to know that I wasn't screaming into a void. I looked at the old fisherman, and I knew he already knew the answer. He was simply waiting for me to acknowledge it myself. The terrifying infinity I saw in the ocean was, in fact, #meta, sex 0.05, but a path. It was a path that led me not forward, but backward, into the very heart of the storm that had first shipwrecked my soul. "The first time I truly prayed," I began, my voice raw but steady, "was not here. It was out there." I pointed a trembling hand towards the dark, churning expanse. My mind was suddenly a whirlwind, not of despair, but of memory. I was no longer on the sand with the old man. I was back in the belly of a different beast, a brutal, unforgiving storm that had swallowed my small fishing boat whole. I had been out for 3 days, the weather report promising clear skies. But the ocean has a way of laughing at human plans. The storm came out of nowhere, a sudden, furious assault of wind and rain. The sky turned an angry, bruised purple, and the waves, once gentle and rolling, became towering, monstrous walls of water. My small boat,
my home and my livelihood, was tossed about like a child's toy. Every plank groaned, every rope snapped taut, and the mast swayed and creaked like a bone about to break. I was alone, utterly, terribly alone. The loneliness was the worst part, a cold, sharp knife in my chest. There was no one to help me, no one to hear my cries, no one to share my fear. The world had shrunk to the size of my small boat and the roaring, endless chaos around it. I had been raised in faith, taught the prayers and the verses, but in that moment, they felt like empty words. They felt like a language I no longer understood, a comfort that had abandoned me in my greatest need. The rain fell in sheets, blinding me, and the wind screamed with a fury that felt personal, as if it were trying to rip my very soul from my body. I clung to the wheel, my knuckles white, my whole body shaking with an uncontrollable terror. Water filled the deck, and I bailed it out with a frantic, desperate energy, my mind numb with fear. All I could think of was the vast, cold emptiness of the deep.
And the words came out, not from my mouth, but from the depths of my being. They were not a recitation of a memorized prayer, but a raw, honest cry of a soul on the brink. "My Lord," I sobbed, my voice choked with emotion, "please don't abandon me. Please, don't leave me to face this alone." It was a desperate plea, a confession of my helplessness, and a final, fragile reach for a hand to hold. It was a prayer born not of strength, but of utter brokenness. And in the very act of saying it, of giving up all control and confessing my fear, something shifted. I didn't see a miracle, no parting of the seas or sudden calm, but I felt a change. The terror didn't vanish, but it softened. My soul, which had been in complete agony, found a small, unexpected pocket of peace. My desperate plea was a testament to my total surrender, a sign that my will had finally broken and I was ready to receive. It was the first time I truly understood the meaning of my faith, not as a shield from the storm, but as a light within it. It was the moment I stopped trying to control and began to trust. The storm raged on, but inside, I was no longer adrift. The tempest raged for what felt like an eternity, a relentless fury of wind and water determined to break me completely. After my last desperate prayer, something inside me had shifted. The fear was still there, a cold knot in my gut, but it was no longer a suffocating panic. It was a dull ache I could live with, a backdrop to a newfound, quiet resolve. I was no longer fighting the storm. I was simply existing within it. I clung to a piece of wreckage, my body battered and exhausted, my mind a blank slate of pure survival. The world
#@meta, pause, sex 0.05, and a new understanding dawned on me. During the height of the storm, I had prayed for God not to abandon me, and in the quiet aftermath, I realized He hadn't.
The miracle wasn't the storm stopping suddenly, or a rescue boat appearing out of nowhere. The miracle was the strength I had found to endure. The miracle was the small voice in my heart that had urged me to pray, to surrender my terror. The miracle was the profound sense of peace that had settled over me even when the waves were still angry. In that moment, I understood that I was not alone. Something greater than myself had been with me, a quiet, guiding force that had kept me from being swallowed whole by the darkness. It was a force that didn't stop the storm, but gave me the grace to face it. My heart, once a hollow echo chamber of despair, began to swell with a new emotion: gratitude. It was a feeling so powerful it brought fresh tears to my eyes, tears of relief and humble thanks. The words came to me not in a plea, but in a quiet, heartfelt confession. My hands, once clenched in a white-knuckled grip on nothing, now opened in an act of surrender. I looked up at the vast, clear sky and whispered, my voice hoarse but filled with a newfound strength. Oh God, thank you for life. It wasn't just a thanks for being alive in that moment, but a thanks for the life I had, for the life that was to come, for the pain and the fear that had led me to this profound realization. My prayer was a testament to my ultimate surrender, a gentle confession that I could not do it alone. It was a moment of true transformation. I was no longer a victim of the storm, but a survivor, a witness to a greater power I had failed to see. My journey had just begun, not with a triumph, but with a humble whisper of gratitude. The sea, once a symbol of my despair, now felt like a sacred space.
Start. He walked a few steps away and pointed his gnarled finger at the sand. I followed his gaze. There, in the soft, wet sand near the water's edge, were two distinct sets of footprints. One was a clear, fresh set that belonged to me, leading from where I had first come to my spot on the driftwood. The other was an older, half-faded set, barely visible, running parallel to mine. He knelt down, his hand brushing gently over the older prints. "When you feel like you are alone," he said, his voice a quiet rumble. "When you feel like the world is collapsing and your prayers are unheard, you are not really alone." He looked up at me, his wise eyes holding mine. "Those footprints," he said, gesturing to the older, more faded ones, "they are always there. They are the footprints of a love that walks with you, always. In the darkest of storms, in the loneliest of nights. Your feet may have faltered, but his never did. You see two sets of footprints now, but there were moments, weren't there, when you only saw one, when you were too tired, too broken to see anything but your own struggle." His words struck me with the force of a physical blow. The old, familiar story of footprints in the sand took on a new, personal meaning in this moment. It wasn't just a parable I had read. It was a living truth being revealed to me on the very ground I stood on. He was showing me that my feeling of being alone wasn't a reflection of reality, but a reflection of my limited perspective. He stood up, brushing the sand from his knees. "Your prayer in the storm," he continued, "was a prayer of surrender. It was a confession that you couldn't do it alone. And in that very moment, you opened your heart to the presence that was already there. Your desperation was the doorway to a deeper faith." My mind raced back to that night, to the moment I had let go of the wheel. I hadn't felt a physical presence, but I had felt a shift, a softening of my terror. The old man was telling me that that feeling was not a figment of my imagination, but a tangible touch of God's love. My heart ached with a stashed meta. pause underscore sex 0.05. Help me to remember that even in the darkest of storms, you are walking beside me. It wasn't a prayer for a sign, but a prayer to change my own sight. It was a prayer to open my heart and my mind to a truth that had been there all along. The old man nodded, a silent witness to my new confession. I finally understood that faith was not about getting answers to my prayers, but about learning to see the answers that were already there. It was about finding God not in the miracle, but in the mundane, not in the absence of a storm, but in the peace I found within it. I finally saw the truth of his first question. My fear was just the beginning. The real journey was about learning to see the infinite not as a threat, but as an embrace. I had found the path to my own salvation, not by fighting, but by surrendering to the love that had been there all along. The old fisherman sat back down on the driftwood, his gaze once again fixed on the unending rhythm of the waves. My prayer had left me feeling raw but renewed, a fragile seedling of hope planted in the barren soil of my soul. I was no longer consumed by my own pain, but had a newfound capacity to see beyond it. He didn't comment on my words, simply nodded, as if a new chapter had just begun. He took a long, slow breath of the salty air, and then he began to speak again, his voice as gentle as the tide coming in. "The sea," he said, "it teaches you about more than just your own troubles. It teaches you about the sorrows of the world. It teaches you about compassion." I looked at him, confused. To me, the sea was still a symbol of my own struggle and the fear of the unknown. How could it teach me about the pain of others? He saw the question in my eyes. "Each wave that breaks on this shore," he explained, "carries a story. Not a story of triumph, but of grief, of longing, of unspoken pain." You could see the ocean itself, terrifying, beautiful, and endless sea of sorrow. He wasn't telling me these stories to sadden me, but to expand my heart. He was showing me that my pain was not unique, that it was a small part of a much larger, shared human experience. My own suffering, in the face of theirs, suddenly felt less like a personal punishment and more like a universal bond. I looked out at the dark water, and I no longer saw just my own terror. I saw the tears of a grieving child, the silent vigil of a devoted wife, the raw, unfiltered pain of thousands of souls who had stood on shores across the world, staring at the same endless sea and begging for answers. A new kind of ache, one of profound empathy, filled my chest. I felt the weight of it, the shared burden of a broken world, and for the first time, it didn't feel suffocating. It felt like a shared truth, a connection that transcended language and time. My eyes welled up with fresh tears, not for myself, but for the countless others who had felt this same crushing despair. I thought of the millions of people who have ever cried out to God, who have begged for a sign, who have felt that same terrible loneliness. My own prayer, in the grand scheme of things, felt small, but also part of a chorus of voices spanning all of history. I turned to the old man, my voice filled with a new kind of sadness.
This world, I began, the words catching in my throat. This world is filled with so much pain. It was a simple, honest lament, a confession of a truth I had finally acknowledged. I was no longer lost in my own suffering. I was a witness to the suffering of all humanity. And in that moment, I realized that true faith was not just about finding my own way, but about carrying the
Hashtag @meta, pause, sex, 0.05. A brutal echo of the storm that had almost claimed my life. It was a terrifying, loud noise of a world without order, a world of unpredictable chaos. But now, as I sat beside the old fisherman, it was different. I found myself listening to the waves not with fear, but with a strange, new sensitivity. I began to hear something else in their sound. The powerful crashes were still there, but beneath them there was a constant, underlying murmur, a low, continuous hum that seemed to carry every emotion imaginable. It was a whisper of sadness, a sigh of resignation, a soft hum of a song lost to the ages. It was a chorus of grief, a collective symphony of sorrow. The old man seemed to be listening to the same thing. He closed his eyes, a serene look on his face, as if he were attending a sacred ritual. "Listen," he said, his voice barely audible above the waves. "Do you hear it? That's the cry of the sea." I nodded, feeling the truth of his words deep in my bones. "It's so mournful," I said, my voice thick with newfound empathy. "It's a sound of a world that is aching." The old man opened his eyes and looked at me, a profound and gentle wisdom radiating from him. "It is the cry of the sea," he repeated, "but it is also the collective cry of every single soul in this world. Every heart that has ever felt alone. Every person who has ever looked out at the vastness of their life and asked, why? Every child that has lost a parent. Every parent that has lost a child. Every soul that has felt the crushing weight of despair. It is the cry of every spirit yearning for comfort." His words painted a picture of humanity I had never considered. My own anguish, which had felt so isolating just a short time ago, was now a small, single note in a grand and sorrowful song. I felt the profound truth of his statement, the universality of my pain. We are all, in our own way, standing on our own shore, listening to the same waves, wrestling with the same Sex 0.05. Please listen to the cries from the deepest parts of our hearts. Please hear the unspoken sorrows of every soul that stands on this shore. Please listen to the cries of the world, and in your infinite love, offer us comfort, offer us peace. My prayer was no longer a question of your existence, but a statement of my belief in your boundless compassion. I had found God not in the miracle of a calm sea, but in the shared sorrow of a broken world. I was no longer a lone victim, but a part of a collective prayer, a small voice in a powerful, endless chorus. After my heartfelt prayer for the world's sorrows, the old fisherman gave a slow, gentle nod. He then rose from the driftwood and gestured for me to follow him. The stars were now a brilliant canopy overhead, a vast, swirling testament to the universe's endless beauty. We walked in silence for a while, the sand soft beneath our feet, until we reached a rocky outcrop that jutted out into the sea. I was confused.
We were moving away from the open water, towards a place that seemed less grand, less majestic. But when we reached the edge of the rocks, he stopped and motioned for me to look down. The water here was calm, clear, and shallow, a sharp contrast to the turbulent, dark expanse we had left behind. I looked into the water, and what I saw took my breath away. Beneath the seemingly plain surface, a world of unimaginable life and color was thriving. It was a coral reef, a magnificent underwater city teeming with life. Schools of tiny silver fish darted in and out of the coral branches, their scales catching the faint moonlight like scattered diamonds. Vibrant sea anemones swayed gently with the current, their soft tendrils reaching out like dancing fingers. There were fish of every color imaginable, from brilliant blues and fiery reds.
#@meta, pause, sex 0.05. It doesn't fight the storm on the surface. It finds peace and safety in the life that is already there, waiting for it. I felt the truth of his words in my heart. My desperation had been my attempt to fight the storm on the surface, to control the uncontrollable. But the real lesson was not about fighting the waves, but about finding refuge in the depths, in the life that existed below the chaos. It was a lesson in hope, not as a desperate wish, but as a quiet, powerful presence that exists in the core of everything. A hope that lives not in the absence of a storm, but in the certainty that there is always life, always color, and always beauty, even when it's hidden from view. I realized that my prayer for God's presence, which I had said just a short time ago, had been answered in this very moment. He wasn't answering my prayer with a voice from the heavens or a dramatic sign. He was answering it with a tiny fish, a swaying anemone, and a living, breathing testament to his boundless love. He was showing me that even in the midst of the most profound brokenness, there is a world of life that is still thriving. The terrifying infinity I had once feared was not a void of nothingness, but a sacred, living world of infinite beauty. I felt a surge of pure, unadulterated hope, a feeling I had forgotten existed. It was a hope that didn't come from a happy ending, but from a new way of seeing the world, from seeing the miracles that were already there, waiting to be discovered beneath the surface of my pain. My heart was a coral reef, once battered by the storms of life, but now filled with a quiet, vibrant life I had never known. We left the shimmering coral reef, the vision of its vibrant, hidden life still fresh in my mind. #meta, Saled, sex 0.05. Of unresolved pain and unspoken fears that lie in wait. His words resonated with a profound truth. I had just begun to scratch the surface of my own soul to see the beautiful, living parts that had survived the storm. But I knew, deep down, that there were still depths within me that I was afraid to explore. The old man was telling me
that true faith was not just about finding the light in the shallows, but about having the courage to face the darkness in the deep. He wasn't suggesting that I ignore the terrifying parts of myself, but that I recognize them as a part of a larger, more complex whole. Every soul, he said, is a little universe of its own. It has its own sunlit shallows and its own deep, mysterious trenches. And the real journey is not to fill the trenches with light, but to understand that the trenches are also a part of God's infinite creation. They are a part of His design, a testament to the complexity and the profound mystery of His being. His words opened my mind to a new understanding of God's infiniteness. It wasn't just a boundless love in the shallows, but a boundless wisdom that encompassed the depths as well. God wasn't just in the light. He was in the darkness, too. He was in the hidden truths and the buried pains. My fear of the deep, of the things I couldn't control or understand, was a reflection of my fear of the parts of myself that were still unresolved. But the old man was showing me that my brokenness, my imperfections, my hidden sorrows, were not flaws to be hidden, but sacred parts of my own being. Parts that were also a testament to God's boundless nature. I looked out at the dark, unending sea, and for the first time, I didn't see a terrifying void. I saw a profound, beautiful mystery. I saw a mirror of my own soul, a reflection of the God I was so desperately seeking. He wasn't just on the surface, in the gentle waves and the clear skies.
Sex 0.05 in every shadow, in every fear. We walked along the shore for a while in comfortable silence, the sand cool beneath our feet. My mind was still reeling from the fisherman's words. He had taken my fear of the unknown and my grief for the world, and he had transformed them into sources of empathy and courage. The terrifying infinity I had once seen was now beginning to feel like a boundless, beautiful mystery. As we rounded a bend in the shoreline, I saw it in the distance. Perched high on a rocky cliff, a lone lighthouse stood like a silent sentinel against the darkness of the night. Its powerful beam of light cut through the blackness, a slow, steady pulse that reached out over the vast, churning sea. I stopped and stared, a new kind of ache settling in my heart. The lighthouse, with its solitary beam, felt like a symbol of everything I had been. Alone, isolated. Its light a beautiful but lonely presence in a world of darkness. I felt a wave of the old familiar sadness wash over me. I was still that isolated figure, despite the wisdom the old man had shared. I hadn't found a community yet. I had only found a new way to see my loneliness. The fisherman followed my gaze. He didn't need me to speak. He understood. "That lighthouse," he said, his voice a low, thoughtful murmur. "It stands alone, doesn't it? It has no company but the wind and the waves. It never comes down from its cliff. But what is its purpose?" I looked at him, and I knew the answer. Its purpose was to give light, to guide, to save. It was to be a beacon of hope in the darkness. "It never sleeps," the old man continued. "It never falters. It doesn't question its purpose.
It simply shines. It doesn't save the ships by reaching out and pulling them in. It saves them by being.
The lighthouse's beam felt like a silent, powerful answer to my unspoken lament. I turned to the old man, my voice filled with a new kind of vulnerability. "I still feel so alone," I confessed, my voice a small, honest whisper. "I feel so lonely in this darkness." The old man nodded, his eyes filled with a profound and gentle compassion. "Yes," he said, "the lighthouse is alone. But it is not a loneliness of abandonment. It is a loneliness of purpose. It knows its place. It knows its job. Its purpose is not to be in a crowd, but to stand alone, to shine its light for all who are lost. Your loneliness is not a sign of your weakness. It is a sign of your purpose. You are learning to stand alone, to shine your own light, and to guide others without even knowing it." His words were a powerful and profound reframing of my own pain. The loneliness I had always seen as a curse was now a calling. It was a spiritual gift, a path to a deeper understanding of my own purpose. I felt a surge of hope, a powerful, humbling realization that my solitude was not a punishment, but a sacred part of my journey. The loneliness I had felt was a quiet call to a deeper communion, not with others, but with God Himself. I was learning to be the lighthouse, not just to look at it. I was learning to trust in the light I had within me, a light that had been there all along, a constant, unwavering beacon in the storm. I stood there, watching the lighthouse, its beam cutting through the darkness, and I knew that even when I felt the most alone, I was never truly abandoned. My faith was my lighthouse. It was a constant reminder that my purpose was to shine, even when no one was watching, even in the darkest of nights. It was a quiet, powerful testament to the fact that God's love was not a crowd, but a constant, unwavering presence. We sat back down on the sand, the lighthouse's silent, powerful beam a constant reminder of the strength of a faith that stands alone. My heart was. They are the souls who take their time, who learn from every wave and every current. They may not reach their destination quickly, but they arrive with a wisdom that the fast boats will never know. I listened intently, a new kind of understanding dawning on me. He wasn't just talking about boats. He was talking about us. He spoke of a tiny, battered fishing boat he had seen many years ago, a boat that seemed to be held together by hope and prayer alone. Its sails were patched, its hull was scarred, but it kept moving forward, day after day, year after year. "That boat," he said, a soft smile touching his lips, "was a testament to a faith that never gives up." It was a beautiful thing to see. It showed me that strength isn't just in the size of the boat, but in the heart of the soul steering it. He also told me about a grand, magnificent vessel that was lost in a sudden, unexpected storm. It had all the latest technology and a crew of experienced sailors, but a single rogue wave had been enough to send it to the bottom of the sea. "That taught me," the old man said, his voice tinged with a quiet sadness, "that no matter how big your boat is, you are still at the mercy of the ocean. It taught me that we are all in the same boat in a way. We are all sailing on the same unpredictable sea, and we all need a hand to hold when the storms come." His words resonated with a profound truth.
For so long, I had felt completely isolated in my pain. I had felt like my boat was the only one that was taking on water, the only one that was in danger of sinking. But the old man was showing me that my story was just one of countless others. My boat was not an isolated case, but a part of a vast fleet of souls, all navigating their own storms, all seeking
Sex, spirit, I had found God. Not just in my own soul, but in the shared stories of all humanity. My journey had finally come full circle. From a lonely soul lost in a storm to a grateful sailor, part of a great and endless fleet. We sat in comfortable silence, the lesson of the boats settling within me. My heart was no longer a lonely vessel, but a part of a great fleet, all sailing the same sea, all with their own stories of faith and survival. The stars above us were now a brilliant, unending tapestry, a testament to an infinity I was no longer afraid of. And yet, even with this newfound peace, a question, a memory of an old sorrow still lingered in my mind. It was a feeling I had carried for so long that it felt like a part of my very being. I looked out at the waves, watching as they built up, crested, and then crashed onto the shore, dissolving into a whisper of foam and a quick, wet hiss. They were gone, just like that. I turned to the old man, my voice filled with a new kind of vulnerability. I've always felt like that, I confessed, my voice a low, honest murmur. I always felt like a single wave. You come from the depths. You gather strength. You build into something grand. And then you crash against the shore and disappear. Just like that. It felt so meaningless. My life, my struggles, my joys, they felt so temporary, so fleeting. What was the point of all that effort if I was just going to disappear into the vastness of the sea, leaving nothing behind? The old feeling of despair, once so powerful, was now a distant echo. But it was still there, a ghost of a fear I needed to confront. My life, my work, my relationships, they all felt like waves rising and falling, with no lasting impact. Sex 0.05. A journey from a soul consumed by the meaninglessness of life to one that was beginning to find a new, deeper purpose. The very act of speaking it out loud, of giving a voice to that old fear, was a part of my healing. It was a way of releasing the ghost that had been haunting me for so long. I just wanted my life to matter, I confessed, my voice filled with a new kind of humility. I wanted to leave something behind. I wanted to be more than just a passing moment. The words were an honest lament, a prayer for a purpose that I felt I had been denied. It was a confession of a soul that had been a wanderer, a traveler without a destination, a wave that was always returning to the sea, but never leaving a mark. I looked out at the ocean, and the words of the old fisherman about the infinity of God and the courage of the human heart came to me. He had shown me that God was in the depths, in the silence, in the unseen. And now, I was wrestling with the final question. Was God in the temporary, in the fleeting,
in the things that vanish? I was ready to find out. The old man's smile was gentle and knowing. He had listened to my confession of feeling like a meaningless wave, crashing and dissolving, and he hadn't offered a single word of dismissal. He had simply let my fear be heard, and in doing so, he had already begun to heal it. He stood up from the driftwood, his gaze sweeping across the dark, undulating surface of the sea. "You see the wave," he said, his voice a low, thoughtful murmur. "You see it crest and fall, and you believe it has vanished. But what you are not seeing is the current that carries it. The deep, powerful flow of the ocean that is always moving, always connecting, always there." He explained that every wave, no matter how small or how grand, is born from the ocean and returns to it. It does not disappear into nothingness. It simply rejoined. Sex 0.05. Every single moment, every single breath. My feeling of being meaningless was just a reflection of my limited perspective. I had been so focused on the wave, on my own small, individual journey, that I had failed to see the grand, cosmic flow that was carrying me all along. The very act of living, of loving, of crying out, was a sacred part of that flow. I was not a temporary ripple in the ocean. I was a drop of water in an eternal stream. I looked at the waves, and they no longer felt fleeting. They felt like a living, breathing testament to God's endless presence. They were rising and falling, but the water itself was never lost. It was always there, always a part of the greater whole. I felt a surge of hope so powerful it brought tears to my eyes. My life, my very existence, was a part of something eternal. It was a part of a divine purpose that was far greater than my limited human mind could ever comprehend. My fears about leaving a legacy, about making a mark on the world, began to dissolve. The truth was that my life's purpose was not to leave a mark, but to be a part of the flow. It was to live, to love, to pray, to be, to simply exist in the endless, beautiful stream of God's creation. I looked at the old man, my heart filled with a profound and gentle gratitude. He had not given me a grand, magnificent answer. He had given me a simple, beautiful truth. He had taken my despair and turned it into hope. He had taken my fear of meaninglessness and turned it into a quiet, profound purpose. "I hope," I said, my voice filled with a newfound reverence. "I hope that my life is not meaningless." The words were no longer a desperate plea, but a quiet, humble confession of a soul that was finally ready to trust. It was a prayer, a whispered hope that my small, individual journey was a part of a greater, more glorious story. And in that moment, stars are always there. He explained that for sailors, the stars were a compass that never broke, a guide that never lied. He spoke of the North Star, a fixed point of light in the swirling chaos of the night sky, a constant reminder of where home lay. "When you feel utterly lost," he continued, "when you don't know which way is up or down, you don't look at the waves that are trying to sink you. You look up. You find your fixed point. You find your North Star. And that's how you find your way back." His words were a powerful metaphor for my own spiritual journey. My old compass, the one I had used to navigate my life, had broken. My trust in my own strength, my reliance on my own understanding had led me astray. My faith, which had once been my North Star, had become a distant, unreachable light. I had been so focused on the chaos of the storm, on the terrifying waves of my despair, that I had forgotten to look up. The old man was not just telling me a story about a sailor. He was telling me a story about my own soul. He was showing me that my faith was still there, a constant, unwavering light in the sky, even when I had forgotten to look for it. My prayer, my cry for a sign, was not a plea for a new compass, but a plea for my eyes to be opened to the compass that was already there. My journey was not about finding a new path, but about rediscovering the old one. The truth was that my faith had never been lost. I was the one who was lost. The old man's words were a gentle, powerful rebuke to my own foolishness, my own stubbornness. I had been too proud to look up, too consumed by my own suffering, to see the constant, unwavering love that was guiding me home. A profound and gentle sorrow
Hashed at meta. Pause. Sexy. 0.05. Please help me to find my way back to you. My prayer was a testament to my total surrender, a confession that I was ready to stop trying to navigate this journey alone. It was a quiet, powerful statement of my trust in a God who was always there, always guiding, always waiting for me to look up. I had finally found my way home, not to a place, but to a feeling, the feeling of being found. The old man's words had a way of turning my deepest anxieties into profound truths. His simple lessons had given me a new understanding of loneliness, of purpose, and of the sacred, unending flow of life. I felt a quiet peace settle over me, a feeling of being found after being lost for so long. The stars above us were a brilliant, unwavering testimony to a God I was finally learning to see. As we walked, a stronger gust of wind came off the water, and the waves began to pick up, crashing a little more forcefully against the shore. The old fisherman didn't flinch. He just stood there, his body a solid, immovable presence against the wind. "You see," he said, his voice a low, thoughtful murmur. "The sea never stays calm for long. It sends us waves, and not all waves are gentle." He began to talk about the waves of trials, the ones that came not to carry you home, but to test the very strength of your boat. He spoke of the long, difficult years when the fish were scarce, and his family went to bed hungry. He spoke of a terrible sickness that had almost taken his wife, a sickness that had seemed to come out of nowhere, a rogue wave in a life that had been so peaceful. Those waves, he said, they weren't about punishment. They weren't about a lack of faith. They were about teaching me how to be a better sailor. They were about teaching me how to hold the rudder steady when every fiber of my being wanted to give up. He was speaking of the trials that strengthen you, the challenges that force you to find a resilience you never knew you had. I listened to him, and I thought of my own waves of trials. I thought of the endless, sleepless nights. Shashed meta. Celid. Pause. Sex. 0.05. You can only pray for the wisdom to see that the waves are not meant to sink you. They are meant to polish you.
His words were a powerful and profound rebuke to my own self-pity. I had been so consumed by my own exhaustion, my own sense of being worn out, that I had failed to see that my trials were not a sign of God's abandonment, but a sign of His trust. He was giving me an opportunity to grow, to learn, to find a resilience I had never known. I looked out at the dark, churning water, and I no longer saw just my own pain. I saw the struggles of the old man and the struggles of every single soul who has ever fought to stay afloat. I felt a profound sense of shared humanity, a deep, abiding connection to the suffering of others. My own trials, in the grand scheme of things, felt small, but they also felt like a sacred part of a larger, more glorious story. "I'm just so tired of the trials," I confessed, my voice filled with a quiet, honest weariness. "I'm just so exhausted from the constant struggle." It was a confession of a soul that had fought for too long, a soul that was finally ready to surrender not to despair, but to a deeper, more profound kind of faith. The old man smiled, his wise eyes twinkling. He knew that my confession was not a sign of weakness, but a sign of a new beginning. The old man's words about the waves of trials had settled the deep, weary ache in my bones. I had confessed my exhaustion, my frustration with the endless struggle, and he had simply listened. He hadn't judged me or told me to be stronger. He had just heard my truth. We walked in a quiet, contemplative rhythm, the only sound the gentle rhythm of the waves. The air was cool and carried the scent of salt, and the vast, dark expanse of the ocean felt less like a threat and more like a gentle, silent companion. "Many people believe that peace is the absence of a storm," the old man said, his voice a low, thoughtful murmur. "It comes from knowing that even when your boat is being tossed about, you are not alone." He spoke of his own life, of the times when his boat had been in danger of sinking, when his family had been sick, when he had lost everything he had worked for. "In those moments," he said, "my mind would scream with fear, and my heart would be filled with despair. But I would close my eyes, and I would feel a quiet presence within me, a deep stillness that was not of this world. It was a feeling of being held, of being safe, no matter what happened to my boat. That was the peace of God. It was not a peace that came from the outside. It was a peace that came from the inside." His words were a powerful and profound answer to my deepest prayers. I had spent my life begging God to take away the storms, when what I should have been praying for was the peace to face them. I had been so focused on the external world that I had failed to see the powerful, quiet presence that lived within me. The old man was showing me that my faith was not a shield from the trials of the world, but a source of inner peace that would allow me to navigate them. It was a peace that was not based on logic or reason, but on a deep, abiding trust in a God who was with me in all things. I looked at the sea, and its vastness no longer felt terrifying. It felt like a sacred space, a living testament to a God who was powerful enough to hold the whole world in his hands and still be present in the heart of a single soul. My heart, once a vessel of fear and anxiety, began to fill with a new, quiet
kind of hope. My prayer was no longer a desperate plea for the storm to stop. It was a humble, earnest request for the peace,
The only sound, the rhythmic ebb and flow of the tide. The air was cool and filled with the scent of salt, and I felt a sense of belonging I had never known. The old man, as if sensing that my soul was ready for another lesson, reached down and picked something up from the wet sand. He held it out to me. It was a simple, rough oyster shell, its outer surface ridged and unadorned. "Look at this," he said, his voice a low, thoughtful murmur. "It doesn't look like much, does it? It's just a shell." I took it from his hand, turning it over. It was ordinary, unremarkable. He then told me to open it. With a little effort, I pried the two halves apart. Inside, nestled within the fleshy interior, was a tiny, luminous pearl. It was a perfect, shining sphere, its surface catching the faint moonlight and radiating with a soft, gentle glow. I was completely mesmerized. How could something so beautiful be hidden in something so plain? The old man smiled, a knowing look in his wise eyes. "That pearl," he said, "is a beautiful thing. But do you know how it came to be? It began with a tiny grain of sand, an intruder, an irritant that got into the oyster's shell. It was a source of great pain and discomfort. It was a wound." His words struck me with the force of a powerful truth. The oyster, in its pain, had not fought the irritant. It had not tried to get rid of it. Instead, it had embraced it. It had begun to coat the grain of sand with layer after layer of a smooth, beautiful substance, turning its pain into a thing of beauty. "It turned its wound into a treasure," the old man said, his voice filled with a profound and gentle reverence. "It transformed its suffering into a beautiful, glorious thing. Your pain, your struggles, your despair, they are not meant to destroy you. They are the grain of sand. They are the wound." Holding it tight in my hand. My prayer was no longer a desperate plea for comfort. It was a quiet, humble request for the wisdom to see the pain as a gift, for the strength to embrace the wounds that would eventually transform me. My heart, once a vessel of despair, was now filled with a new, quiet sense of purpose. I was not a victim of my past, but a creator of my own future, a humble oyster turning a tiny grain of sand into a beautiful, luminous pearl. The sea was no longer a place of chaos, but a sacred, living testament to the divine, transformative power of God, a power that could turn even the deepest wounds into the most beautiful of treasures. The old man's words about turning pain into a pearl had given me a new lens through which to view my past. The scars I had once tried to hide now felt like badges of honor, a testament to a journey I had never thought I'd survive. The quiet peace of the night settled around us, a gentle embrace of the universe. I felt so safe in his presence, so completely and utterly heard, that I was ready to open a door I had kept locked for years. I was ready to speak of the things that I had never been able to put into words, the fears that were too deep and too painful to articulate. I took a deep breath, and the words came, not in a coherent story, but in fragments, in whispers, in the raw, broken language of a soul that had been holding its breath for too long. "I've always been afraid," I began, my voice a low, honest murmur. "Not of the storms, but of the silence. I've always been afraid that my words, my thoughts, my very being would just
fade away, that no one would hear me, that no one would see me, that I would just be a ghost in a world of living people. I spoke of the feeling of being completely invisible, of having a voice that was too small to be heard. I spoke of the moments of profound despair when I had cried out to God, and the words had felt like they were lost in a void, never reaching the
#@meta, pause, sex 0.05. And in doing so, he gave them a voice. The very act of speaking them out loud was a part of my healing. It was a way of releasing the ghost that had been haunting me for so long.
When I finally fell silent, the only sound was the low, rhythmic roar of the waves. The silence was different this time. It was not a void, but a presence. It was filled with a peace that was not of this world. The old man reached out and placed a gentle, calloused hand on my shoulder. "You are not alone in that fear," he said, his voice a low, comforting rumble. "Every soul has a silent cry, a secret sorrow that is too deep for words. But God doesn't need your words. He doesn't need your voice. He hears your heart." He was speaking of a truth so simple, so profound, that it brought tears to my eyes. God didn't just hear my spoken prayers. He heard the silent screams of my soul. He heard the cries that I couldn't even put into words. He knew my heart, and he loved me in my brokenness, in my fear, in my silence. He hears the silent plea of the soul that is given up, the old man continued. He hears the unspoken questions of the heart that has lost its faith. He hears the quiet sadness of the soul that has nothing left to say. You don't need to find the words. You don't need to make your cries loud. You just need to exist. And he hears you. His words were a powerful and profound answer to my deepest fear. My suffering was not a sign of God's abandonment. It was a testament to his boundless love, a love so deep and so vast that it could hear the silent cries of my soul. I closed my eyes, and my prayer was no longer a plea for a sign. It was a quiet, humble confession of a soul that had finally come home. Nestled within the fleshy interior was a tiny, luminous pearl. It was a perfect, shining sphere, its surface catching the faint moonlight and radiating with a soft, gentle glow. I was completely mesmerized. How could something so beautiful be hidden in something so plain? The old man smiled, a knowing look in his wise eyes. "That pearl," he said, "is a beautiful thing. But do you know how it came to be? It began with a tiny grain of sand, an intruder, an irritant that got into the oyster's shell. It was a source of great pain and discomfort. It was a wound." His words struck me with the force of a powerful truth. The oyster, in its pain, had not fought the irritant. It had not tried to get rid of it. Instead, it had embraced it. It had begun to coat the grain of sand with layer after layer of a smooth, beautiful substance, turning its pain into a thing of beauty. It turned its wound into a treasure, the old man said, his voice filled with a profound and gentle reverence. It transformed its suffering into a beautiful, glorious thing. Your pain, your struggles, your despair, they are not meant to destroy you.
They are the grain of sand. They are the wound. And you are the oyster. You have the power to turn your pain into a pearl. His words were a powerful and profound answer to my deepest fears. I had spent my life trying to avoid pain, trying to get rid of the things that hurt me. I had seen my suffering as a curse, a sign of my own failure. But the old man was showing me that my pain was not a flaw, but a sacred part of my journey. I looked at the pearl in my hand, and I no longer saw just a beautiful object. I saw a living, breathing testament to a profound spiritual truth. I saw my own sleepless nights, my gnawing anxiety, my profound despair, not as a curse, but as a catalyst. I saw them as the grains of sand that were meant to be transformed, to be coated in a substance of my own making, a substance of grace, of wisdom, of a new, profound understanding.
Sex. The old man's words about turning pain into a pearl and finding peace in the heart of the storm had settled a profound peace within me. I held the oyster shell in my hand, its smooth, cool surface a constant reminder of the truth it held. The air was calm, the stars a brilliant, silent testimony to a God I was finally learning to trust. The old man, as if sensing that my soul was ready for a deeper truth, began to speak again, his voice a low, thoughtful murmur. He didn't speak of the sea this time, but of a different kind of shore, a shore of humanity that was often forgotten. I've met all kinds of people in my life, he said, his gaze fixed on the distant, dark expanse. Rich and poor, happy and sad. But the ones that have always stayed with me are the forgotten, the ones who are invisible in this world. He spoke of a man who lived in a small, battered boat, a man who had lost everything he had ever had. He was an outcast, a ghost in the world of the living. No one spoke to him, no one saw him, no one remembered his name. But every morning, before the sun rose, the old man would see him on the shore, a small, solitary figure with a simple book in his hands. It was the Bible. He would read it, the old man said, his voice filled with a profound and gentle reverence, and his face would be filled with a light that you would not believe. He had no friends, no family, no place in the world. But he had God's word. And in that word he found a community, a home, a purpose. He was not forgotten by the one who mattered most. The old man also spoke of a woman who had lived a life of quiet suffering, a woman who had been left behind by everyone she had ever loved. She was not a public figure, not a hero, not a saint. She was just a lonely soul, living in a small, lonely house. But every night, she would light a Sex 0.05 endless chorus of silent sufferers, a great, endless community of quiet believers. The sea, with its endless expanse, no longer felt like a symbol of my loneliness. It felt like a sacred, living testament to the vast, unending community of all souls who have ever lived, who have ever suffered, who have ever found a quiet peace in a God who sees them. My heart, once a selfish vessel of despair, was now a channel for a new, profound sense of solidarity. I closed my eyes, and my prayer was no longer for myself alone. It was a quiet, humble request for the strength to remember the forgotten, to see the invisible, and to remember
that in the eyes of God, no one is ever truly alone. I had finally come home, not to a place of perfect peace, but to a heart filled with the quiet, endless love of a God who sees us all, even in our darkest moments. We walked on, the rhythm of my steps in perfect sync with the ebb and flow of the tide. The old man's words about the forgotten had filled me with a profound sense of solidarity, a feeling of being a part of a great, endless community of believers. The stars above us were a brilliant testimony to a God who saw all, who heard all, even the silent cries of the heart. The old man, as if sensing that my soul was ready for another lesson, began to speak again. He didn't talk about boats or pearls or the stars this time. He spoke of the very ground we were walking on. "You see how the water comes in?" he said, gesturing to a distant point on the shore. "And then it goes out again. It's a constant, unending rhythm. It is the law of the tide. It never stops. It never changes. It is a part of the sea's very being." He explained that #meta, pause, sex 0.05. They are just waiting for their time to return. His words were a powerful and profound rebuke to my own foolishness. I had been so consumed by my own despair, by my own fear of loss, that I had failed to see that nothing was ever truly lost. It was just in a season of waiting. The old man was showing me that my faith was not a fragile thing that could be broken by a moment of sorrow. It was a part of an eternal, unending rhythm, a part of a divine purpose that was far greater than my limited human mind could ever comprehend. I looked at the waves, and they no longer felt fleeting. They felt like a living, breathing testament to God's endless presence. They were rising and falling, but the water itself was never lost. It was always there, always a part of the greater whole. I felt a surge of hope so powerful it brought tears to my eyes. My life, my very existence, was a part of something eternal. It was a part of a divine purpose that was far greater than my limited human mind could ever comprehend. My fears about leaving a legacy, about making a mark on the world, began to dissolve. The truth was that my life's purpose was not to leave a mark, but to be a part of the flow. It was to live, to love, to pray, to be, to simply exist in the endless, beautiful stream of God's creation. I looked at the old man, my heart filled with a profound and gentle gratitude. He had not given me a grand, magnificent answer. He had given me a simple, beautiful truth. He had taken my despair and turned it into hope. He had taken my fear of meaninglessness and turned it into a quiet, profound purpose. I looked at the sea, and I knew that my journey was not about reaching a destination. It was about learning to trust in the rhythm. It was about learning to accept the low tides and to celebrate the high. It was about learning to trust in a God who was always there, in all things, in every
meta, pause, sex, 0.05. He began to put words to the melody, his voice a low, gravelly rumble, like the sound of a well-worn boat cutting through calm water.
It was a simple song, a heartfelt ballad of a life spent in communion with the ocean. He sang of the sun rising on the water, of the stars guiding him home, of the fish that filled his nets and the storms that tested his soul. He sang of a God who was present in all things, in the bounty and in the scarcity, in the joy and in the sorrow. "The sea, she holds me," he sang, his voice filled with a profound and gentle reverence. "And the sky, she guides me home. My Lord, he is with me, and I am not alone." His song was not a performance. It was a prayer, a confession of a soul that was completely and utterly at peace with its place in the world. It was a quiet, powerful testament to a faith that had been forged not in a church, but on the vast, unending sea. I stood there, listening to his song, and a powerful emotion I had forgotten existed began to stir in my heart. It was a feeling of pure, unadulterated joy. It was the feeling of a soul that was finally home, of a heart that was finally at peace. The words of his song were so simple, so honest, so profound, that they reached into the deepest, most broken parts of my being and began to heal them. I felt a surge of gratitude, a deep, abiding thankfulness for the life I had, for the journey I had been on, and for the wisdom of this old man who had taught me how to see the world in a new way. I no longer felt like a lost, lonely soul. I felt like a part of a great, endless song, a small, humble note in a chorus of faith that had been sung for all of eternity. And then, without even thinking, I began to hum along. My voice, which had been so full of despair and frustration just a short time ago, was now a small, quiet part of
#meta, pause, sex, 0.05. A silence that felt more beautiful and more complete than any sound. I looked at the old man, my heart filled with a gratitude so deep it was almost painful. He had taken a man who was lost and broken and had, with nothing but simple stories and profound wisdom, guided him home. I felt a new sense of purpose, a new understanding of God, and a new, quiet strength in my heart. The world no longer felt like a terrifying void of meaninglessness, but a living, breathing testament to a boundless and unending love. Just then, a single seagull glided across the sky, its wings a perfect, graceful arc against the dark canvas of the night. It flew low, right over our heads, and then it turned its head and looked at us for a moment before flying off into the darkness. I was mesmerized by its silent, powerful grace. It was a beautiful, fleeting moment, a perfect pause in the quiet solitude of the night. The old man smiled, his wise eyes fixed on the distant, disappearing bird. "You see that?" he said, his voice a low, thoughtful murmur. "That was for you." I was confused. He saw the question in my eyes. "Sometimes," he explained, "the answer to your prayer does not come in a grand, magnificent way. It doesn't come in a parting of the seas or a voice from the heavens. It comes in the most humble, the most simple, the most unassuming of ways. It comes in a seagull's flight, in a gentle breeze, in a whispered word from a stranger on the shore." His words were a powerful and profound answer to my deepest fears. I had spent so much of my life waiting for a sign,
a grand, dramatic sign that would confirm God's existence. I had been waiting for a miracle, when what I should have been looking for was the small, gentle signs of His presence in my everyday life. The old man was showing me that God's love was not a powerful, grand display. It was a quiet, constant presence that was always with me, in all things, in every moment. It was in the feel of the sand beneath my feet.
Sex, humble confession of a soul that had finally come home. I was no longer a lost, lonely soul. I was a grateful traveler, a humble student, a witness to a love that was so deep and so vast that it could be seen in the flight of a single seagull. My journey was not about a final destination, but about the very act of seeing. It was about learning to see the beauty, the grace, the love that was already there. In all things, in every moment, I had finally found my way home, not to a place of perfect peace, but to a heart filled with the quiet, endless love of a God who was always there, in all things, in every season, in every ebb and flow of the tide. I was a part of the rhythm, and the rhythm was a part of me. The old man's words, his song, and the perfect, gentle grace of the seagull had settled my spirit. I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in years, a profound, quiet gratitude for a God who was present in all things. The night was now a soft, comforting blanket, and the stars a brilliant, silent testimony to a boundless and unending love. The old man, as if sensing my heart was open and ready for another lesson, spoke again, his voice a low, thoughtful murmur. "The sea has a taste, doesn't it?" he said, and I nodded. The taste of salt was a constant presence in the air, on my skin, and on my lips. It was a taste I had come to associate with the ocean's raw, untamed power. He reached down and touched the water with his finger, then brought it to his lips. "It is the taste of salt," he said. "It is the taste of the sea, and it is the taste of every single tear that has ever been shed on its shores." His words struck me with a powerful, emotional force. My mind flashed back to my own tears, to the ones I had shed in the storm on my boat, and to the ones I had shed on this very shore just a short time ago. I had always seen my tears as a sign of my weakness, but a testament to my profound and tender heart. They were a sign that I was alive, that I was human, that I was connected to the sorrow and the joy of all humanity. The sea, with its endless saltiness, no longer felt like a symbol of a bitter, unforgiving world. It felt like a living, breathing testament to a God who was so compassionate that He would make the very waters of the earth taste like our tears. A constant reminder that He was with us in our sorrow, and that our pain too was a sacred part of His creation. I felt a surge of release, a profound and gentle forgiveness for myself, for all the times I had held back my tears, for all the times I had been afraid to feel. My heart, once a hard, bitter vessel, now felt soft and open, a vessel for a new, profound kind of love. I closed my eyes, and my prayer was no longer a desperate plea for a sign. It was a quiet, humble confession of a soul that had finally come home. Not to a place of perfect peace, but to a heart filled with a profound and gentle gratitude for a God who was always there, in all things, in every season, in every ebb and flow of the tide. I was a part of the rhythm, and the rhythm was a part of me. I had finally found my way home, not to a place without tears, but to a heart that was no longer afraid to cry. My sorrow was not a sign of God's abandonment, but a testament to his boundless love. A love so deep and so vast that it could be tasted in the salt of our tears. The old man's words had a way of turning my deepest anxieties into profound truths. My fear of the endless sea had become an embrace of a boundless God. Sex. It began with a tiny grain of sand, an intruder, an irritant that got into the oyster's shell. It was a source of great pain and discomfort.
It was a wound.
His words struck me with the force of a powerful truth. The oyster, in its pain, had not fought the irritant. It had not tried to get rid of it. Instead, it had embraced it. It had begun to coat the grain of sand with layer after layer of a smooth, beautiful substance, turning its pain into a thing of beauty. It turned its wound into a treasure, the old man said, his voice filled with a profound and gentle reverence. It transformed its suffering into a beautiful, glorious thing. Your pain, your struggles, your despair, they are not meant to destroy you. They are the grain of sand. They are the wound. And you are the oyster. You have the power to turn your pain into a pearl. His words were a powerful and profound answer to my deepest fears. I had spent my life trying to avoid pain, trying to get rid of the things that hurt me. I had seen my suffering as a curse, a sign of my own failure. But the old man was showing me that my pain was not a flaw, but a sacred part of my journey. I closed the shell, holding it tight in my hand. My prayer was no longer a desperate plea for comfort. It was a quiet, humble request for the wisdom to see the pain as a gift, for the strength to embrace the wounds that would eventually transform me. My heart, once a vessel of despair, was now filled with a new, quiet sense of purpose. I was not a victim of my past, but a creator of my own future. A humble oyster turning a tiny grain of sand into a beautiful, luminous pearl. The sea was no longer a place of chaos.
Meta, sex 0.05.
Solitary figure on the vast, quiet sea. And he had found a single, small school of fish, a miracle in the midst of a barren sea. That was a miracle, he said, his voice filled with a profound and gentle reverence. It wasn't a grand, magnificent display. It was a quiet, simple blessing. It was a miracle of quiet trust, of a faith that knew that even in the most barren of seasons, God was still there, still working, still providing. His words were a powerful and profound answer to a question I had never been able to put into words. I had spent my life waiting for a miracle, a grand, dramatic sign that would confirm God's existence. I had been waiting for a miracle,
when what I should have been looking for was the small, gentle signs of his presence in my everyday life. The old man was showing me that God's love was not a powerful, grand display. It was a quiet, constant presence that was always with me, in all things, in every moment. He also spoke of the miracle of the sunrise, a miracle that happens every single day and no one ever notices. The sun, he said, does not need our permission to rise. It does not need our prayers to fill the sky with its light. It just rises. It is a constant, unending promise of a new day, of a new beginning, of a new hope. That is a miracle. It is a quiet, powerful testament to a God who is always there, always providing, always a constant presence in our lives. His words were a profound and gentle rebuke to my own foolishness. I had been so consumed by my own suffering, by my own fear of the unknown, that I had failed to see the small, gentle miracles that were happening all around me. The old man was showing me that my faith was not about seeing the grand, but about seeing the small. It was about finding God not in the extraordinary, but in the ordinary. I looked at the stars, and I no longer felt the ache of a soul that was searching. I felt the profound, gentle peace of a soul that had found its home. My prayer, my desperate plea for a sign, had been answered.
Sex 0.05. But about the very act of seeing. It was about learning to see the beauty, the grace, the love that was already there, in all things, in every moment. I had finally found my way home, not to a place of perfect peace, but to a heart filled with the quiet, endless love of a God who was always there, in all things, in every season, in every ebb and flow of the tide. I was a part of the rhythm, and the rhythm was a part of me. The old man's words had a way of turning my deepest anxieties into profound truths. My fear of the endless sea had become an embrace of a boundless God. My exhaustion from the storms had become a quiet understanding of inner peace. I was no longer a victim of life's chaos, but a sailor learning to navigate it. We walked on in a comfortable silence, the only sound the rhythmic ebb and flow of the tide. The air was cool and carried the scent of salt, and I felt a sense of belonging I had never known. The old man, as if sensing that my soul was ready for another lesson, reached down and picked something up from the wet sand. He held it out to me. It was a simple, rough oyster shell, its outer surface ridged and unadorned. "Look at this," he said, his voice a low, thoughtful murmur. "It doesn't look like much, does it? It's just a shell." I took it from his hand, turning it over. It was ordinary, unremarkable. He then told me to open it. With a little effort, I pried the two halves apart. Inside, nestled within the fleshy interior, was a tiny, luminous pearl. It was a perfect, shining sphere, its surface catching the faint moonlight and radiating with a soft, gentle glow. I was completely mesmerized. How could something so beautiful be hidden in something so plain? The old man smiled, a knowing look in his wise eyes. "That pearl," he said, "is a beautiful thing. But do you know how it came to be? It began with a tiny grain of sand, an intruder, an irritant that got it. Sex 0.05. But a sacred part of my journey. I closed the shell, holding it tight in my hand. My prayer was no longer a desperate plea for comfort. It was a quiet, humble request for the wisdom to see the pain as a gift, for the strength to embrace the wounds that would eventually transform me. My heart,
once a vessel of despair, was now filled with a new, quiet sense of purpose. I was not a victim of my past, but a creator of my own future, a humble oyster turning a tiny grain of sand into a beautiful, luminous pearl. The sea was no longer a place of chaos, but a sacred, living testament to the divine, transformative power of God. A power that could turn even the deepest wounds into the most beautiful of treasures. The old man's words had a way of turning my deepest anxieties into profound truths. My fear of the endless sea had become an embrace of a boundless God. My exhaustion from the storms had become a quiet understanding of inner peace. I was no longer a victim of life's chaos, but a sailor learning to navigate it. We walked on in a comfortable silence, the only sound the rhythmic ebb and flow of the tide. The air was cool and carried the scent of salt, and I felt a sense of belonging I had never known. The old man, as if sensing that my soul was ready for another lesson, reached down and picked something up from the wet sand. He held it out to me. It was a simple, rough oyster shell, its outer surface ridged and unadorned. "Look at this," he said, his voice a low, thoughtful murmur. "It doesn't look like much, does it? It's just a shell." I took it from his hand, turning it over. It was ordinary, unremarkable. He then told me to open it. With a little effort, I pried the two halves apart. Inside, nestled within the fleshy interior, was a tiny, luminous pearl. It was a perfect, shining sphere, its surface catching the faint moonlight and radiating with a soft, gentle glow. I was completely mesmerized. How could something so beautiful be hidden in something so plain? The old man smiled.
Hashed at meta, pause. You have the power to turn your pain into a pearl. His words were a powerful and profound answer to my deepest fears. I had spent my life trying to avoid pain, trying to get rid of the things that hurt me. I had seen my suffering as a curse, a sign of my own failure. But the old man was showing me that my pain was not a flaw, but a sacred part of my journey. I closed the shell, holding it tight in my hand. My prayer was no longer a desperate plea for comfort. It was a quiet, humble request for the wisdom to see the pain as a gift, for the strength to embrace the wounds that would eventually transform me. My heart, once a vessel of despair, was now filled with a new, quiet sense of purpose. I was not a victim of my past, but a creator of my own future. A humble oyster turning a tiny grain of sand into a beautiful, luminous pearl. The sea was no longer a place of chaos, but a sacred, living testament to the divine, transformative power of God. A power that could turn even the deepest wounds into the most beautiful of treasures. The old man's words had a way of turning my deepest anxieties into profound truths. My fear of the endless sea had become an embrace of a boundless God. My exhaustion from the storms had become a quiet understanding of inner peace. I was no longer a victim of life's chaos, but a sailor learning to navigate it. We walked on in a comfortable silence, the only sound the rhythmic ebb and flow of the tide. The air was cool and carried the scent of salt, and I felt a sense of belonging I had never known. The old man, as if sensing that my soul was ready for another lesson, reached down and picked something up from the wet sand. He held it out to me. It was a simple, rough oyster shell, its outer surface ridged and unadorned. "Look at this," he said, his voice a low, thoughtful murmur. "It doesn't look like much, does it? It's just a shell." I took it from his hand, turning it over. It was ordinary,
unremarkable.
Shit. Meta. Pause. Sex. 0.05. It transformed its suffering into a beautiful, glorious thing. Your pain, your struggles, your despair, they are not meant to destroy you. They are the grain of sand.
They are the wound, and you are the oyster. You have the power to turn your pain into a pearl. His words were a powerful and profound answer to my deepest fears. I had spent my life trying to avoid pain, trying to get rid of the things that hurt me. I had seen my suffering as a curse, a sign of my own failure. But the old man was showing me that my pain was not a flaw, but a sacred part of my journey. I closed the shell, holding it tight in my hand. My prayer was no longer a desperate plea for comfort. It was a quiet, humble request for the wisdom to see the pain as a gift, for the strength to embrace the wounds that would eventually transform me. My heart, once a vessel of despair, was now filled with a new, quiet sense of purpose. I was not a victim of my past, but a creator of my own future. A humble oyster, turning a tiny grain of sand into a beautiful, luminous pearl. The sea was no longer a place of chaos, but a sacred, living testament to the divine, transformative power of God, a power that could turn even the deepest wounds into the most beautiful of treasures.